My name is Domingo Martinez, and at 67, I never thought my only son would scream, "You'll rot in here," before smashing my phone and leaving me to die in my own home. Thomas and his wife sailed away on their luxury cruise, while I sat trapped between four walls with no medication, no phone, and no hope. If you're watching this story of betrayal and unexpected revenge, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from, and subscribe to hear how my secret in the basement turned my imprisonment into their worst nightmare. I spent 40 years as a construction foreman before retiring. These hands built homes for hundreds of families across 3 states. But the one I took the most pride in was my own. Every nail, every board, every inch of this place was crafted by me, a testament to what hard work can create. It was supposed to be where Margaret and I would grow old together, watching our son Thomas raise his own family nearby. Life had other plans. Margaret was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer 5 years ago. Despite fighting with everything she had, I lost my sweetheart of 42 years. Thomas was my rock during that time. He would drive over 3 times a week, helping with her care, bringing groceries, and just sitting with us. Sometimes I would catch him in the garden, crying by himself, trying to be strong for both of us. When we lost her, Thomas and I clung to each other at the funeral, 2 broken men trying to figure out how to move forward without the woman who had been our compass. After Margaret passed, I threw myself into woodworking projects in my garage shop. Thomas would visit on Sundays, and we would grill steaks on the patio, talking about his accounting job and my latest carpentry creations. He seemed happy with his career, though I sometimes sensed a restlessness in him. Margaret always said Thomas had expensive tastes that his salary couldn't quite satisfy. Everything changed when Thomas met Sophia at his accounting firm. She was new, transferred from the Chicago office, all polished edges and designer clothes. The first time he brought her to Sunday dinner, I noticed how she surveyed my home with barely concealed disdain, eyes lingering on the handmade furniture as if trying to estimate its inadequate value. "Your house has character, Mr. Martinez," she said, in a tone suggesting character was a disease. "But so many stairs must be difficult at your age." I was only 65 then, climbing stairs just fine, but that comment was the first drop of poison. Thomas laughed uncomfortably and changed the subject. Their courtship was brief, and within 6 months, they were married at an extravagant downtown hotel that I later learned Thomas could barely afford. I wore my only suit and gave a toast with shaking hands, trying to ignore how out of place I felt among Sophia's glossy friends and family. Around that time, I started having heart problems. Nothing severe initially, just some irregular rhythms that required daily medication. The doctor said it was manageable with proper care, but Thomas immediately overreacted. "Dad, you can't live alone anymore," he insisted during one visit. "What if something happens and nobody's there?" "People my age live alone all the time," I argued. The doctor said I'm fine with the medication. I began noticing changes in Thomas after the wedding. His Sunday visits became monthly, then sporadic. Phone calls grew shorter, often interrupted by Sophia needing his attention for something urgent. When they did visit, Sophia would run her finger along my shelves checking for dust, or rearrange my kitchen without asking, claiming she was helping organize things properly. The house became a point of contention. Built on 2 acres just outside town, it was larger than I needed alone, but filled with memories I wasn't ready to abandon. "You should sell this place, Domingo," Sophia said during a rare visit. "It's too much maintenance, and the property values in this area are peaking. We could find you something cozy in a retirement community." "This house is my life's work," I replied. "I built it for Margaret and me. My memories are in these walls." "Memories don't keep the roof from leaking," Thomas interjected, siding with his wife, though I had never mentioned any leaks. Their suggestions grew more insistent with each visit. They brought brochures for senior apartments, showed me listings for condos, even scheduled a meeting with a real estate agent without telling me first. I remained firm in my refusal, which seemed to frustrate them beyond reason. "You're being stubborn, Dad," Thomas snapped during one argument. "We're only trying to help you," I don't need that kind of help, I said. I just need my son to visit more than once every couple months. That comment led to our first serious fight, with Thomas storming out and not calling for 3 weeks. When he finally returned, Sophia came along, both wearing concerned expressions that didn't reach their eyes. "We've been worried sick," Sophia said, though neither had called to check on me. "Thomas barely sleeps thinking about you all alone in this big house." Their concerns seemed to intensify around my 67th birthday. Thomas organized a small celebration at their downtown condo, announcing they would be more involved in my care going forward. I should have recognized the predatory gleam in Sophia's eyes when she raised her glass to toast new arrangements, but I was just happy to have my son's attention again. The first sign of real trouble came a week later. I returned from a doctor's appointment to find Thomas in my garage workshop, filling garbage bags with my woodworking tools. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "These are dangerous, Dad. You shouldn't be using power tools at your age, especially with your heart condition." "Those tools are my hobby, my passion," I protested, reaching for my prized hand plane that had belonged to my father. Thomas pulled the bag away. "You could hurt yourself. What if you had an accident while using the table saw? You'd bleed out before anyone found you." That night, my entire workshop disappeared, tools collected over a lifetime, projects half finished, all gone without my permission. When I called Thomas to demand their return, Sophia answered. "Thomas is very upset right now," she said coolly. "Those tools were a liability, Domingo. We're just looking out for your safety." It was just the beginning of what was to come, though I couldn't see the full picture yet. My son, who I had raised with all the love and care I possessed, was slowly becoming someone I didn't recognize, influenced by a woman whose appetite for control seemed insatiable. 2 weeks after my birthday, Thomas and Sophia arrived with suitcases, announcing they would be staying temporarily to help me get organized. Thomas claimed they were having their condo repainted and needed a place to stay, but I later discovered this was a lie when their mail arrived still addressed to the downtown apartment. They took over the master bedroom upstairs, the one I had shared with Margaret for decades. I was relocated to the small guest room on the first floor, supposedly for my convenience so I wouldn't need to climb stairs. My protests were ignored, with Sophia insisting it was for the best while rearranging my personal belongings without permission. Within days, the house I had built with my own hands no longer felt like mine. Sophia moved furniture, claiming certain arrangements were safer or more modern. Family photos disappeared from walls, replaced by generic artwork she brought from their condo. When I asked about a particular picture of Margaret and me from our 30th anniversary, Sophia vaguely mentioned putting it in storage to declutter the visual space. Thomas began intercepting my mail, claiming he would handle all the paperwork to reduce my stress. Bank statements, bills, even personal letters from old friends now passed through his hands first. I only discovered this when Walter, my former construction colleague, called to ask why I hadn't responded to his 3 letters about an upcoming retirement gathering. "What letters?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I sent them to your address," Walter said. 3 of them over the past month. When confronted, Thomas claimed he had set them aside to discuss with me but had forgotten. The letters never materialized. The most disturbing development involved my heart medication. I had always been meticulous about taking my pills each morning with breakfast, keeping them in a weekly organizer on the kitchen counter. After Sophia reorganized the kitchen, claiming my system was cluttered and unsanitary, my medications moved to a high cabinet that required a step stool to reach. "I'll get your pills for you each morning," Sophia announced. "It's safer this way." Soon, I noticed occasional missed days in my pill organizer. When I mentioned this to Thomas, he brushed it off. "Sophia has a lot on her plate managing this house, Dad. Sometimes she might forget. It's not like missing 1 pill will kill you, but 1 missed pill became 2, then 3 per week." My heart palpitations returned, along with dizziness and fatigue. When I insisted on managing my own medication again, Thomas accused me of not appreciating their help. "Do you know how much Sophia has given up to be here taking care of you?" he demanded. "Her career is on hold. Our social life is non-existent, and this is the thanks we get. Sophia made a show of preparing special meals for my heart condition, often bland, unseasoned dishes that bore little resemblance to the nutrition plan my doctor had recommended. When I attempted to cook for myself, she would intervene, claiming I was making a mess or using too much sodium. The portions grew smaller, and I began losing weight at an alarming rate. My friends gradually stopped visiting. Walter tried twice, but Sophia answered the door both times, telling him I was resting and not up for company. Frank, my neighbor of 15 years, reported a similar experience. Even my weekly coffee group at the local diner became inaccessible when my car keys mysteriously disappeared. "You shouldn't be driving anymore," Thomas informed me when I searched for them. "Your reflexes aren't what they used to be." "My doctor hasn't restricted my driving," I argued. "I passed my license renewal just 3 months ago." Thomas shrugged. "We're just being cautious. Sophia can drive you wherever you need to go." But Sophia was always too busy, or had important errands whenever I needed to go somewhere. My world shrank to the confines of my own home, which felt increasingly like a prison. The financial manipulation began subtly. Thomas suggested adding his name to my bank accounts, just as a precaution, in case I became incapacitated. Worried about his increasing control but not wanting another argument, I reluctantly agreed to a joint checking account for household expenses, while maintaining my separate savings and retirement accounts. Within weeks, I noticed large withdrawals from my retirement fund. When questioned, Thomas produced vague receipts for home modifications and medical expenses that I had never authorized or benefited from. The bathroom renovation he claimed to have ordered never materialized, nor did the special heart monitoring equipment he said was back-ordered. The final blow to my independence came when I discovered my car missing from the garage. In its place was a receipt of sale to a dealer across town, signed with what appeared to be my signature, though I had no recollection of signing any such document. "We discussed this, Dad," Thomas insisted when I confronted him. "The car was just sitting there depreciating. We got a great price, and the money is safely in your account." The money never appeared in any account I could access. The landline phone was moved to Thomas's makeshift office, all calls screened before I was allowed to speak to anyone. My cell phone, my last line of independent communication, was kept charging in their bedroom, always conveniently missing when I asked to use it. 6 months into this arrangement, I overheard Thomas and Sophia discussing plans for a 2-week Caribbean cruise. They spoke in hushed tones in the kitchen, unaware I was sitting in the adjacent sunroom. "We deserve this break," Sophia was saying. "Dealing with your father every day is exhausting." "What about his care while we're gone?" Thomas asked, showing a flicker of the son I used to know. "He'll be fine for 2 weeks," Sophia dismissed. "We'll stock the fridge, and he can microwave his meals. It's not like he's an invalid, despite how he acts sometimes." When I approached them later about their travel plans and my care arrangements, they became defensive and evasive. "How did you know about that?" Thomas demanded, face flushing with anger. "Were you eavesdropping on us?" "I was sitting in my own sunroom," I replied calmly. "I need to know what arrangements you're making for my medication and care if you're leaving for 2 weeks. Sophia's expression hardened. "We're still finalizing details, but since you brought it up, we've been thinking it might be time to consider a more permanent solution for your situation." "What situation?" "This is my home. A nursing home evaluation," Thomas clarified, avoiding my eyes. "Just as a precaution. Many places have waiting lists, so it's good to get on them early." "I don't need a nursing home," I stated firmly, "and I won't go to one." The conversation ended in strained silence, but I could feel something ominous taking shape. That night, I heard them arguing in their bedroom, Sophia's voice rising occasionally with phrases like "golden opportunity" and "have to act now." My son's voice was quieter, seemingly conflicted but ultimately yielding to his wife's more forceful personality. I went to bed that night with a sense of foreboding that proved all too accurate when morning came. The day before Thomas and Sophia were scheduled to depart for their cruise, I discovered something deeply troubling. While they were out shopping for last-minute travel necessities, I managed to access the medicine cabinet using a step stool. My pill organizer showed I had only 4 days' worth of heart medication left, not nearly enough for their 2-week absence. I waited in the living room for their return, my heart literally and figuratively heavy. When they walked in with shopping bags from expensive stores, I noticed none appeared to contain pharmacy items. "Thomas," I said calmly, "we need to discuss my medication. I only have enough for 4 days, not the 2 weeks you'll be gone." Thomas and Sophia exchanged a quick glance that sent a chill down my spine. "We'll pick up your refill tomorrow before we leave," Thomas replied dismissively, but something in his tone rang false. "I called the pharmacy while you were out," I continued. "They said my refill isn't due for another 3 weeks. The prescription should have enough pills to last until then, but my organizer is nearly empty." Sophia stepped forward, her expression cold. "Are you accusing us of something, Domingo? Perhaps you've been forgetting to take your pills properly. Memory issues are common at your age." "My memory is perfectly fine," I stated. "Pills have been missing from my organizer for months. And what about arrangements for my care while you're gone? Who will check on me? What if there's an emergency?" Thomas set his shopping bags down with deliberate calmness. "Dad, you're exaggerating your needs for attention. You're not helpless. The neighbors are nearby if something happens. The same neighbors you've been turning away from the door for months," I challenged. "The friends you've isolated me from. I doubt they even know I'm still living here." Sophia's face tightened. "This is ridiculous. We've sacrificed everything to care for you, and all you do is complain and make accusations. That's why I called Franklin yesterday," I said, mentioning my old friend who had retired from his law practice but still had connections throughout the county. "He's going to stop by tomorrow to check on things and give me some advice." The change in Thomas's face was instantaneous and terrifying. The mask of annoyed concern dropped, replaced by something I had never seen in my son before. Pure, unfiltered rage. "You did what?" he hissed, stepping toward me. "You called a lawyer behind our backs? After everything we've done for you?" "Franklin is a friend," I said, standing my ground, though my heart was racing dangerously. "And yes, I need outside advice because something isn't right here. My money is disappearing. My medication is being withheld. I'm isolated from friends, and now you're leaving for 2 weeks without proper arrangements for my care." "There are no arrangements needed because you're not as sick as you pretend to be," Thomas shouted, color rising in his face. "You've been manipulating us with your supposed heart condition to keep us trapped here. That's not true, and you know it," I replied, my voice wavering slightly. "My doctor can confirm my condition. In fact, I think it's time I called Adult Protective Services to look into what's happening here." I reached for my cell phone that I had managed to retrieve from their room earlier, but Thomas was faster. He lunged forward, grabbing the phone from my hand and hurling it against the brick fireplace where it shattered into pieces. "You'll rot in here," he screamed, his face contorted with fury I never knew he was capable of. "No more calls, no more complaints, no more interference. We are done catering to your neediness and ingratitude." I stood frozen in shock, not recognizing the man before me. This couldn't be my son, the boy I had raised, taught to fish, helped with homework, comforted after nightmares. But when I looked to Sophia for help, I saw only satisfaction in her eyes, a small smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Thomas," I said softly, trying to reach the son I knew was somewhere inside this stranger. "This isn't you. Please think about what you're doing." "This is exactly who I am now, Dad," he replied, his voice suddenly calm and cold. "A man who's tired of waiting for his inheritance while his father lives in a house that's way too big for him, spending money that could be put to better use." The brutal honesty of his statement left me speechless. As I watched, Thomas moved methodically through the house, checking and securing windows, collecting spare keys from drawers, and instructing Sophia to inventory the food in the kitchen. "We need to make sure there's enough for him to survive until we get back," he said clinically, "but not enough for comfort or waste." They installed new deadbolts on the exterior doors, work that Thomas must have prepared for in advance. The phone lines were disconnected, the internet modem unplugged and taken. They even removed the batteries from the smoke detectors. explaining with chilling casualness that they didn't want the low battery chirps disturbing my rest while they were gone. Through it all, I sat in my recliner, physically unharmed but spiritually shattered. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that my mind struggled to process what was happening. This was elder abuse, imprisonment, possibly attempted murder through medication withholding. Yet it was being perpetrated by my own flesh and blood. "Thomas, please." I tried one final time as they prepared to leave. "This isn't right. I'm your father, and I'm your son who spent the last year putting his life on hold for you," he replied without emotion. "2 weeks alone might help you appreciate what we've done for you." I turned to Sophia, desperate. "Please reconsider. If something happens to me while you're gone." She adjusted her designer purse on her shoulder and looked down at me with cold contempt. "Then, this house will be ours soon enough. Either way, we win." They took my wallet, my phone fragments, my heart medication, and every set of keys. The last image I had was Thomas standing in the doorway, surveying his handiwork with satisfaction. "We'll be back in 2 weeks. Try not to die before then," he said flatly. "Though honestly, it might be easier for everyone if you did." The door closed, locks engaged, and I was alone, imprisoned in the home I had built with love, by the son I had raised with devotion, wondering how I had missed the darkness growing in him all these years. The first morning of my imprisonment dawned with brutal clarity. Sunlight streamed through windows I couldn't open, illuminating a home that had become my cage. I took stock of my situation with the methodical approach I had used on construction sites for decades. Assess resources, identify hazards, develop a plan. The refrigerator contained calculated portions of food, enough to prevent starvation but portioned to suggest deliberate restriction. Each container was labeled with dates and times in Sophia's precise handwriting. The pantry held similar, limited supplies. Water still ran from the taps, thankfully, though I wondered if that oversight might be corrected remotely. My heart condition presented the most immediate danger. Without medication, I could expect increasing palpitations, dizziness, and potentially life-threatening arrhythmias within days. I had already been experiencing symptoms due to the missed doses Sophia had been orchestrating for months. I searched the house for any overlooked medication, finding only over-the-counter pain relievers and antacids. My prescription bottles were gone, even the empty ones I had kept in my nightstand drawer. Thomas had been thorough. The emotional devastation was perhaps worse than the physical challenges. As I moved through the quiet house, memories ambushed me at every turn. In the kitchen, I remembered teaching Thomas to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, his small hands covered in flour, face serious with concentration. In the living room, the spot where he had taken his first steps, arms outstretched toward me, Margaret clapping and crying happy tears. The backyard where we had built his treehouse together, me teaching him to measure twice, cut once. How had that sweet boy transformed into the man who could look me in the eyes and say he hoped I would die? What poison had seeped into his heart over the years? Was it entirely Sophia's influence? Or had there always been a darkness in him I had refused to see? Margaret would have known. She always read people better than I did, especially our son. "Thomas needs extra guidance about money," she used to say. "He values things too much and people too little." Had I failed in providing that guidance? Was this partly my fault? No. I refused to accept blame for their criminal actions. Whatever character flaws my son might have, nothing justified abandoning his father to die. I spent the first day exploring the house for resources or escape options. All exterior doors had new deadbolts requiring keys from both sides, a significant fire hazard that demonstrated how little they cared about my safety. Windows were locked, some apparently nailed shut recently. I tried signaling to neighbors by hanging a sheet in an upstairs window, but the houses were set far apart, and no one seemed to notice. By the second day, my heart symptoms were worsening. I rationed physical activity, resting frequently, and focusing on staying calm to reduce strain on my heart. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their actions might actually prove their false narrative about my health if the stress and medication deprivation triggered a serious cardiac event. On the third day, while searching the hall closet for anything useful, my hand brushed against something familiar, pushed to the back corner. My old oak walking cane, carved with intricate patterns during a woodworking phase years ago. Thomas must have overlooked it during his systematic removal of potential weapons and tools. Though primarily decorative, its solid weight provided both practical support and a measure of security. That same afternoon, while resting in what used to be Margaret's sewing room, a flash of inspiration struck. Margaret had always been practical, prepared for emergencies in ways I sometimes teased her about. "Better safe than sorry," she would reply with a knowing smile. Her sewing kit had been moved to a box in the guest room closet when Thomas and Sophia rearranged the house. I retrieved it, hands shaking with more than just cardiac symptoms. The vintage metal cookie tin contained her collection of threads, needles, buttons, and other sewing supplies. But Margaret had modified it years ago, creating a false bottom that only someone who knew to look for it would find. I pressed the hidden catch, and the compartment opened to reveal a small emergency house key she had stored there just in case. Tears filled my eyes at this gift from beyond, my Margaret still looking out for me years after her passing. The key wouldn't work on the new exterior deadbolts, but it might open interior doors they had secured, including the basement. Thomas had declared the basement stairs unsafe months ago, installing a keyed deadbolt on the door. I had protested at the time, pointing out the solid handrail I had installed myself, but he overruled me, claiming it was for my protection. Now I understood the real reason. The basement contained tools, potential weapons, and possibly means of communication or escape. Margaret's key slid into the lock smoothly, turning with a satisfying click. I opened the door carefully, wary of potential alarms or booby traps. The familiar smell of sawdust and concrete greeted me as I descended slowly, one hand on the handrail, the other gripping my rediscovered cane. The basement was largely as I remembered, though clearly Thomas had been through it. My remaining woodworking supplies were scattered, some boxes opened and partially emptied. But what caught my attention were stacks of boxes labeled charity donation that contained Margaret's belongings, items Thomas had told me were donated months ago to simplify my living space. I opened the first box with trembling hands to find Margaret's winter clothes, still wrapped in tissue paper. Another contained her book collection, a third her cherished vinyl records. But it was the fourth box that broke my heart. Our family photo albums, carefully organized by year, documenting Thomas's entire childhood. The happy, smiling boy in those photos seemed impossibly distant from the man who had imprisoned me. Moving deeper into the basement, I discovered my old workbench had been hastily searched but not dismantled. The hidden compartment beneath the false drawer bottom remained intact, containing the emergency cash Margaret and I had always kept available, about $800. In the corner, nearly hidden behind seasonal decorations, I found a plastic tub containing Margaret's craft supplies. Rummaging through fabric scraps and yarn, my hand closed around something unexpected, an old emergency cell phone. Margaret had kept it charged in her car, then later in her purse during her cancer treatments in case of emergency. Thomas must have overlooked it when clearing out her belongings. The battery was dead, but nearby I located a box of old electronics, including several chargers. Finding one compatible with the ancient flip phone became my mission, testing each until I found a match. Now I just needed electricity, which thankfully Thomas had not thought to disconnect, likely to maintain appearances of a normally occupied home from outside. As the phone charged in a basement outlet, I continued exploring. A dusty laptop surfaced in another box, one Thomas had given us years ago when he upgraded to a newer model. It was password protected, but I recalled Margaret using it primarily for recipe storage and family photo organization. I tried her usual password variations and gained access on the third attempt. The laptop wouldn't connect to the internet initially, the home Wi-Fi password having been changed before Thomas and Sophia left. But sitting near the basement window that faced my neighbor Frank's house, I discovered his unsecured guest network appeared just within range. The connection was weak but present, a digital lifeline to the outside world. While waiting for the phone to charge, I examined the laptop's contents. Margaret had been more tech-savvy than I realized, maintaining organized folders of important documents. In one folder labeled Family Backup, I discovered a gold mine. Scanned copies of our wills, property deeds, insurance policies, medical records, and financial statements. Margaret had created digital backups of everything important, even updating them during her illness when she knew her time was growing short. Another folder contained emails she had saved, including concerning exchanges with Thomas from the last months of her life. In them, he repeatedly asked about insurance policies, property values, and investment accounts, ostensibly to help manage details during her illness. Margaret's responses were loving but increasingly guarded, suggesting she had sensed something in his questions that disturbed her. The most disturbing discovery was a USB drive tucked into a small fabric pocket inside her sewing case. When connected to the laptop, it contained a video file labeled with my name. With shaking hands, I pressed play to see Margaret's face fill the screen, recorded sometime during her final months, judging by her appearance. "Domingo, my love," her voice came through the small speakers. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and something has made you suspicious enough to find this drive. I pray I'm wrong, but I've noticed changes in Thomas that worry me. His questions about money, his impatience when discussing the future, the way he looks at our home sometimes as if calculating its value." She paused, visibly gathering strength. "I've prepared copies of all important documents on this drive and the laptop. There's also an envelope with our lawyer, Stuart Wilson, containing my private concerns. If Thomas ever begins pressuring you about the house or money after I'm gone, go to Stuart immediately. And remember the emergency phone in my craft box if you ever need help." The video ended with her smiling sadly. "I hope I'm wrong, Domingo. I hope our son proves better than my fears. But if not, know that I love you, and I trust you to stand firm. You built this house with your hands, and no one has the right to take it from you, especially not our son." The old flip phone beeped, indicating it had enough charge to function. As I powered it on, I marveled at Margaret's foresight. Even from beyond, she was still protecting me, still my partner against whatever the world threw our way. I didn't have much time to formulate a plan, but with Margaret's preparations and my own determination, I now had weapons against the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. With the charged emergency phone and laptop connected to Frank's Wi-Fi, I began piecing together the extent of Thomas and Sophia's betrayal. My fingers, accustomed to the precision work of carpentry, now navigated online banking sites and property records with determined focus. What I discovered sickened me. Thomas had systematically emptied my accounts over the past 6 months. Large transfers moved money first to our joint household account, then disappeared into accounts I had no access to. My retirement fund, meant to support me for the rest of my life, had been reduced to less than $20,000 from nearly $300,000. The property records revealed an even more sinister deception. Thomas had added himself to my house deed, not as a joint tenant with right of survivorship as would be normal for estate planning purposes, but with me as a life tenant only, meaning I could stay in the house until death but had no right to sell it. The document contained my signature, clearly forged since I had never agreed to such an arrangement. Most disturbing was a draft real estate listing I found cached in a password-protected folder on a cloud storage account linked to Thomas's email. The listing, scheduled to go live 3 weeks after their cruise return, advertised my home as coming soon with professional photos already uploaded. The description mentioned recent renovations and no current occupants, with a move-in date shortly after their planned return. They weren't just stealing from me or abusing me. They were planning for my death during their absence. Email exchanges between Thomas and Sophia, accessible through the cloud account that remained logged in on the laptop, revealed the calculated nature of their scheme. They had begun discussing elder care options and inheritance acceleration 2 years earlier. Shortly after Sophia entered the picture, "Dad sitting on a gold mine with that property," Thomas had written. 2 acres that close to the developing north side could be worth 7 figures if we subdivided it properly. Sophia's replies were even colder. The longer he lives there alone, the more the value drains away. These old people can't maintain properties properly. We need to move quickly before he does something stupid like taking out a reverse mortgage or giving it to charity. Photos stored in Sophia's linked accounts documented their lavish spending with my money. A new luxury car, designer clothes, a vacation property in the mountains they had never mentioned, and deposits on the cruise they were currently enjoying. All funded by the retirement Margaret and I had carefully built over a lifetime of hard work. My hands shook with a combination of fury, heartbreak, and determination. This wasn't just financial abuse. This was calculated evil perpetrated by my own son and his wife. I needed help, but I had to be strategic. Thomas and Sophia could return early if alerted, and in my weakened condition, I couldn't risk another confrontation without support in place. Using the emergency phone, I called Franklin, my oldest friend and former lawyer, careful to keep the conversation brief, to preserve battery life. "Domingo?" Franklin's voice was shocked. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for months." "I don't have much time to explain," I said quickly. "I'm trapped in my house. Thomas and Sophia have taken my medication, disconnected communications, and gone on a cruise. I need help, but carefully. If they suspect anything, they might return early and destroy evidence." Franklin's response was immediate and decisive. "I'm contacting Adult Protective Services right now. Don't try to leave if you're weak without your medication. Document everything. Take photos if possible. I'll bring help first thing tomorrow morning." "Wait," I cautioned. "I have a better idea. If authorities show up, Thomas might claim I let them in willingly and deny everything. We need to catch them in the act." I explained my plan, which Franklin reluctantly agreed to after ensuring I was stable enough to wait another day. He would prepare all the necessary legal and medical support but remain on standby until I gave the signal. Returning to the laptop, I documented everything methodically. I photographed the locked doors and windows using the laptop's camera, cataloged the limited food supply with dates and Sophia's handwritten labels, and created an inventory of missing items, including my medication, wallet, and phones. I downloaded copies of all financial records showing the suspicious transfers, saved the property documents revealing the deed changes, and backed up the emails discussing their plans for the house sale. Everything went onto Margaret's USB drive, which I kept on a cord around my neck. My heart symptoms were worsening by the hour. Palpitations came more frequently, accompanied by dizziness and chest pressure that forced me to sit frequently. Without my medication, I estimated I had perhaps 3 more days before risking a serious cardiac event. Whatever I planned needed to happen quickly. Using the weak internet connection, I found the cruise line's website and located their ship, currently docked in the Bahamas. According to the itinerary, they would reach their next port in 2 days. Thomas would likely check messages when in port to ensure his plan was proceeding without interference. That's when I would spring my trap. I drafted a text message calculated to trigger Thomas's deepest fears and greed. Something that would bring him running back immediately, abandoning the cruise and exposing his true intentions. The message needed to be believable but alarming enough to overcome any skepticism. After careful consideration, I composed, "Found Margaret's secret safe in the basement wall. All documents sent to Franklin. He's coming tomorrow with police." Simple, specific, and targeting exactly what would terrify Thomas most: discovery of his crimes before he could complete them. The mention of Margaret would add credibility, as she had indeed been secretive about certain precautions. The reference to Franklin, whom Thomas knew was a former lawyer with connections throughout the county, would add urgency. I set a timer on the emergency phone to send the text the following morning when they would likely be checking messages in port. Then I focused on preserving my strength, eating small portions of the rationed food, and resting to minimize strain on my heart. That night, alone in the house that had become both prison and battleground, I spoke aloud to Margaret as I often did when alone. "You were right to worry about him, my love, but you were also right to prepare. Tomorrow we fight back, together." I slept fitfully, dreams filled with images of Thomas as a child, mixed with the twisted face that had screamed, You'll rot in here. The contrast was painful beyond words. How does a parent reconcile such betrayal from their own child? There would be time to process that grief later, if I survived. For now, I needed all my focus on the plan. Morning came, and with it, the automated text message sent precisely as scheduled. Now I could only wait, conserving energy and preparing for what would come next. I positioned myself strategically in the living room with clear sight lines to the front door, Margaret's USB drive around my neck, the emergency phone hidden in my shirt pocket set to record, and my carved oak cane within reach. The waiting was perhaps the hardest part. Each hour stretched endlessly, marked by increasing heart symptoms that reminded me of the physical danger I faced. But beneath the physical discomfort burned a steady flame of determination. They had underestimated me, assuming age had diminished my will to survive. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The emergency phone began ringing within an hour of my text being sent. Thomas's number flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail, knowing that answering would reveal too much too soon. 3 more calls came in rapid succession, each more frantic than the last, judging by the increasingly urgent voicemail notifications. Using the laptop and cruise tracking website, I monitored their ship's status. By late afternoon, I confirmed what I had hoped. The vessel was returning to port ahead of schedule for a passenger emergency disembarkation. Thomas and Sophia were cutting their vacation short, exactly as I had anticipated. I spent the intervening hours preparing the house for their return and my planned confrontation. I moved furniture subtly to create clear exit paths for myself, while establishing potential barriers if needed. The recording function on the emergency phone was tested multiple times to ensure it would capture everything. My cane remained within reach, both for support and protection if necessary. Franklin called to confirm all arrangements were in place. Adult Protective Services has been notified, along with the police, he assured me. They understand the situation and the need for careful timing. Just send the text when they arrive, and we'll be there within minutes. My heart symptoms had worsened considerably. The pressure in my chest was now constant, with waves of dizziness that forced me to sit frequently. But adrenaline and determination provided strength I hadn't known I still possessed. I would see this through, for Margaret, for justice, and for myself. The sound of a car speeding into the driveway came just after 9 that evening, tires screeching on gravel, doors slamming with frantic energy. Keys rattled in the new locks as Thomas struggled to open the door, his movements rushed and clumsy. When the door finally swung open, the expressions on their faces made all my suffering worthwhile. Thomas looked wild-eyed and disheveled, still wearing beach clothes inappropriate for the cooling autumn evening. Sophia followed close behind, her designer sundress wrinkled, makeup smeared from what appeared to be a hasty departure. Both froze in the doorway at the sight of me sitting calmly in my recliner, hands folded over my cane, very much alive and alert. "Dad," Thomas gasped, genuine shock in his voice. You're up. Did you expect otherwise?" I asked mildly, pressing the record button on the hidden phone. They entered cautiously, Thomas's eyes darting around the room as if expecting to find police waiting. Sophia closed the door behind them, her composed mask quickly replacing the initial surprise. "We got your message," Thomas said, attempting casualness that his trembling hands betrayed. "Something about a safe? We were worried about you, so we came back early." "How thoughtful," I replied evenly, "especially considering you left me without medication, communication, or adequate food for 2 weeks. That kind of worry must be exhausting." Thomas stepped forward, dropping all pretense. "Where is it? What safe? What documents did you send Franklin?" I remained silent, watching his anxiety build with each passing second. Sophia moved to his side, her calculating eyes never leaving my face. "He's bluffing," she said finally. "There's no safe. He's trying to manipulate us, Thomas." "Then why did he mention Franklin specifically?" Thomas snapped at her. "And how did he even send a message?" "We took his phones, disconnected everything. While they argued, I sent the pre-composed text to Franklin. 'They're here,' door unlocked." Thomas abruptly turned away, heading for the basement door. I'm checking downstairs. Watch him. Sophia stood over me, arms crossed, contempt evident in every line of her body. You've caused a lot of unnecessary drama, Domingo. We were trying to help you, and this is how you repay us? Making up stories and interrupting our vacation. Help me? I echoed, keeping my voice steady for the recording. By withholding my heart medication, by imprisoning me in my own home, by stealing my retirement savings and planning to sell my house while I supposedly died alone here. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. Prove any of that. It's your word against ours, and Thomas will tell everyone about your growing confusion and paranoia. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected accountant or a deteriorating old man? Thomas returned from the basement, wild-eyed and frantic. There's no safe. Nothing's disturbed down there. What kind of game are you playing, Dad? I smiled calmly, though my heart raced painfully in my chest. No games, Thomas. Just truth. I know everything. The money transfers, the property deed changes, the house listing scheduled to go live after your return. I know about the mountain property you bought with my retirement funds, the new Mercedes, the investments in Sophia's name. The blood drained from Thomas's face as I listed each item with specific details only someone with access to their accounts would know. Sophia's composure slipped further with each revelation. That's impossible, she whispered. You couldn't know all that. Margaret knew you better than you realized, Thomas. I continued. She saw something in you that worried her before she died. She prepared for this possibility, left me ways to protect myself that you never discovered. Thomas's expression morphed from shock to desperate anger. Whatever you think you know, it doesn't matter. This is my house too now. I'm on the deed. Your money is legally in our accounts. Even if you complained, it would take months or years to sort out in court, and in your condition. He gestured dismissively at my weakened state. You might not have months, Sophia added, her voice turning silky. Not without your medication, which, by the way, we forgot to refill in our rush to return to you. The threat was unmistakable. They were doubling down, realizing that if I truly had evidence, their only recourse was to ensure I couldn't use it. The situation was escalating exactly as I had hoped, revealing their true intentions while being recorded. We can still work this out, Dad, Thomas said, shifting to a conciliatory tone while moving closer. Tell us what you found, what you sent Franklin, and we'll make sure you're taken care of properly. Like you've taken care of me so far? I asked, leaving me to die alone without medication. That was a misunderstanding, Thomas insisted, though his eyes remained cold and calculating. We thought the neighbor would check on you. There must have been confusion about the medication timing. No confusion, I stated firmly. Just attempted murder through medication, withholding, imprisonment, financial exploitation, and fraud. All federal crimes with significant penalties, Thomas. Sophia's patience finally snapped. Enough of this. He's bluffing, Thomas. We need to finish what we started and deal with the consequences later. He has nothing concrete. It's all empty threats from a desperate old man. The mask had fallen completely now, revealing the true Sophia in all her callous cruelty. Thomas hesitated, seemingly caught between self-preservation and some last remaining thread of filial responsibility. That's when the knock came at the front door. Thomas froze, eyes widening with genuine fear. Who's that? Did you call someone? Why don't you answer it and find out? I suggested calmly. Sophia grabbed Thomas's arm. Don't open it. It could be a trap. The knocking continued, more insistent now, followed by a familiar voice. Domingo? It's Franklin. Are you in there? Police and Adult Protective Services are with me. Thomas lunged for the door, attempting to engage the deadbolt, but in their hasty entrance earlier, they had left it unlocked. The door swung open to reveal Franklin flanked by 2 police officers and a woman holding a county identification badge. Thomas Martinez? One officer asked. We'd like to ask you some questions about your father's welfare. Thomas immediately shifted to his public persona, all concerned son and confusion. Officers, my father has been experiencing cognitive issues. He's been making bizarre accusations and— Step aside, sir. the officer interrupted firmly. "We have reason to believe Mr. Domingo Martinez may be in danger." As they entered, the Adult Protective Services worker came directly to me, kneeling beside my chair. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Karen Winters from County Services. Are you in immediate medical distress?" "I have a heart condition," I explained, my voice weaker as the adrenaline began to fade. "I've been without my medication for 4 days. It was deliberately withheld." She turned to the officers. "We need medical assistance immediately." Thomas tried to intervene. "This is ridiculous. We just returned from vacation to check on him. There's been a misunderstanding about his medication." Franklin stepped forward, the lawyer in him evident despite his retirement. "Officers, Mr. Martinez contacted me yesterday after being imprisoned in his home by his son and daughter-in-law. They removed his medication, phones, and means of contact before leaving on vacation. He has evidence of financial exploitation and elder abuse." I reached into my pocket and handed over the emergency phone. "Everything is recorded here, including their statements since returning. The USB drive around my neck contains financial records showing theft of nearly $300,000 from my accounts, forged property documents, and plans to sell this house while I was left to die." The second officer began examining the new deadbolts on doors and windows, noting how they required keys from both sides. "Fire hazard," he commented grimly. "Illegal in residential homes. Effectively imprisons anyone inside without a key." Thomas's desperate denials grew more frantic as the evidence mounted. "He's confused. He doesn't remember giving us permission to handle his finances. We were protecting him from himself." Sophia had fallen uncharacteristically silent, her sharp legal mind likely calculating potential charges and penalties. An EMT team arrived within minutes, immediately checking my vitals and administering emergency medication for my heart condition. Their concern was evident as they reported dangerously elevated blood pressure and irregular heart rhythms consistent with medication withdrawal. "He needs hospital evaluation immediately," the lead paramedic declared. This level of cardiac stress in someone with his condition could have been fatal within days. As they prepared me for transport, the police began the formal process of taking Thomas and Sophia into custody. The charges were read aloud: elder abuse, unlawful imprisonment, financial exploitation, fraud, and attempted murder through deliberate withholding of life-sustaining medication. "This is a mistake," Thomas shouted as handcuffs were applied. "Dad, tell them you gave us permission. Tell them." I met my son's eyes one final time before they took him away, searching for any glimpse of the boy I had raised, the child who had once drawn me Father's Day cards with wobbly letters, declaring me world's best dad. "I gave you love, Thomas," I said quietly. "I gave you values and opportunities and unconditional support. I never gave you permission to become the kind of man who would leave his father to die for money." Sophia, practical to the end, had already asked for her lawyer as they escorted her to the separate police vehicle. As the paramedics wheeled me toward the ambulance, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and profound sorrow. I had survived their betrayal and ensured they would face justice, but at the cost of the last family connection I had in this world. The son I loved was truly gone, replaced by a stranger capable of unspeakable cruelty. Franklin squeezed my hand as they loaded me into the ambulance. "Margaret would be proud of you, Domingo. You fought back with the same quiet strength she always admired. Through my pain and exhaustion, I managed a small smile. She helped me, even now. She always knew what might come." The ambulance doors closed, and as we drove away from the house I had built with my own hands, I closed my eyes and whispered a thank you to my Margaret for her foresight, her protection, and her enduring love that had reached beyond death to save me when I needed her most. The hospital stay lasted 10 days, longer than medical necessity required but extended by social workers and adult protective services to ensure proper arrangements for my return home. My heart condition, severely aggravated by the medication withdrawal, gradually stabilized under proper treatment, though doctors warned some damage might be permanent. The physical recovery would be challenging but possible. The emotional healing would prove far more complex. Unable to return immediately to the house that now held such traumatic associations, I accepted Franklin's generous offer to stay in his guest house, a comfortable small cottage behind his main residence. From this safe harbor, I began the difficult process of reclaiming my life and processing the profound betrayal that had nearly ended it. The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed, partly due to the overwhelming evidence and partly due to Franklin's connections in the county justice system. Temporary restraining orders were immediately issued against both Thomas and Sophia, preventing any contact with me or access to my remaining assets. Emergency court orders froze all accounts containing my transferred funds, though many had already been depleted. A financial forensic team traced the complicated web of transactions Thomas had created, recovering approximately 60% of my stolen retirement funds. The luxury car had been seized and liquidated. The vacation property had liens placed against it, and their personal accounts were emptied to make restitution. The process was complex and incomplete, but it prevented them from profiting from their crimes. The most difficult legal battle involved undoing the property deed manipulation. Thomas had used his accounting knowledge and connections to create documentation that appeared legitimate on surface examination. Fortunately, the evidence of forgery was clear when examined by experts, and Margaret's meticulous record-keeping provided proof I had never intended such an arrangement. After 3 months of legal proceedings, my full ownership of the home was restored. When I finally returned to the house, accompanied by Franklin and a support team from Adult Protective Services, I discovered how extensive Thomas's plans had been. Hidden in his former upstairs office, architects' drawings detailed extensive renovations scheduled to begin immediately after their cruise. The plans showed my family home converted to a luxury property with an outdoor kitchen, expanded master suite, and pool installation. The modest home I had built with my own hands would have been unrecognizable, all traces of Margaret and our life together erased for maximum resale value. Most disturbing was the master suite plan labeled contingent on vacancy, with a handwritten note in Thomas's writing. 30 days after clearing personal effects, they had been designing their renovation timeline around my anticipated death during their absence. Criminal charges mounted as investigators uncovered the full scope of their actions. Beyond the elder abuse and financial crimes, evidence of deliberate medication tampering emerged from pharmacy records, showing Thomas had been systematically reducing my dosages while keeping the labels unchanged. This elevated the charges to include premeditated attempted murder, carrying potential sentences of decades in prison. Throughout this period, I attended weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Lauren Phillips, a specialist in trauma and family betrayal. Our first sessions consisted mostly of me sitting in stunned silence, unable to articulate the depth of pain Thomas's actions had caused. Many parents in your situation feel responsible somehow, Dr. Phillips observed during our third session. They question what they did wrong in raising a child capable of such betrayal. I have asked myself that every day, I admitted. Where did I fail him? Was I too strict, too lenient? Did I miss signs of this darkness when he was young? Sometimes there are no answers that bring peace, she replied gently. Some people make choices based on their own internal moral compass, regardless of how they were raised. Your focus needs to be on your healing, not on solving the puzzle of Thomas's choices. Those words became a touchstone for me in the months that followed. I might never understand the complete why of Thomas's betrayal, but I could choose how to move forward from it. Gradually, I began reconnecting with friends Thomas and Sophia had deliberately isolated me from. Walter organized a gathering of my former construction colleagues, men I had worked alongside for decades who expressed outrage and support in equal measure. Frank and other neighbors, horrified to learn what had happened literally next door, created a neighborhood check-in system for all elderly residents. The decision to sell my house came not from fear but from practical acceptance. The 2-story structure required maintenance that my heart condition now made difficult, and every room held memories both beautiful and painful. After careful consideration, I found a smaller single-level home in a planned community 15 minutes away, close enough to maintain friendships but removed from the daily reminders of betrayal. 6 months after the arrest, I received notice that Thomas wished to see me. Against the advice of many, including Franklin, I agreed to a supervised meeting at the detention center. I needed to look my son in the eyes one final time, to seek whatever closure might be possible. The man who sat across from me in the visitation room bore little resemblance to either the boy I had raised or the enraged stranger who had imprisoned me. Thomas looked diminished, his designer clothes replaced by standard-issue detention wear. His confident posture collapsed into defensive hunching. "You look well, Dad," he began awkwardly, eyes darting around rather than meeting mine directly. "I'm recovering," I replied simply. "No thanks to your efforts." He flinched but continued. "My lawyer says I shouldn't talk to you about the case, but I wanted you to know there were circumstances you don't understand. Sophia pushed for most of it. The financial pressure we were under." I raised my hand to stop him. "I didn't come for excuses or blame shifting, Thomas. Nothing excuses what you did. I came to ask just one question." He waited, tension visible in his shoulders. "When did you stop loving me?" I asked quietly. "Was there a specific moment when your father became merely an obstacle to wealth? Or was it gradual, a slow erosion of everything your mother and I taught you about family and honor?" The question seemed to strike him physically. For a brief moment, I glimpsed genuine anguish in his expression before the defensive mask returned. "It wasn't like that," he muttered. "I didn't want you to suffer. It just got out of control. Sophia had plans, expectations. The lifestyle was expensive. Once we started, there seemed no way to stop. It wasn't an answer, not really, but it told me everything I needed to know." Thomas could not or would not acknowledge the fundamental moral failure his actions represented. In his mind, he remained a victim of circumstances, rather than the architect of a calculated crime against his own father. "I hope you find peace somehow, Thomas," I said, rising to leave, though our allotted time wasn't complete. "I won't be returning." His composure broke then, a flash of the desperation I'd seen when he returned to find me alive and the authorities waiting. "Dad, wait! What about after all this is over? Years from now? Will you ever forgive me?" I paused at the door, considering his question with the seriousness it deserved. "Forgiveness isn't required for my healing," I said finally, echoing Dr. Phillips's wisdom. "I don't hate you, Thomas. I simply accept that the son I loved is gone. The man you've become is someone I don't know and don't wish to know." I left without looking back, my heart heavy but my spirit lighter for having spoken my truth. I would later learn that Sophia had already accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Thomas in exchange for reduced charges. Her practical nature had prevailed once again, this time turning against the partner with whom she had planned such calculated cruelty. In the year that followed, I found unexpected purpose through volunteering at the county senior center. What began as occupational therapy recommended by my doctors evolved into a vital new chapter of my life. I started a support group for victims of family financial exploitation, discovering to my sorrow how common such betrayal had become. We met weekly, sharing stories and resources, helping each other navigate the complex emotional and practical aftermath of family betrayal. I used my construction knowledge to help secure homes against external threats, while others contributed legal, financial, or emotional support based on their experiences and backgrounds. Together, we created a family of choice, bound by shared trauma, but focused on recovery rather than resentment. With the help of an adult education instructor, I developed an educational program about recognizing the warning signs of elder exploitation. The program was eventually adopted by senior centers throughout the county, then the state. Each presentation began with my own story, stripped of self-pity but honest about both the betrayal and the recovery. The greatest danger, I would tell audiences of seniors and their adult children, is believing it can't happen in your family. Love is not always protection against greed. Trust should be accompanied by verification, especially when substantial assets are involved. On the second anniversary of what I now simply called the incident, I sat on the patio of my new home, watching hummingbirds visit the feeder Margaret would have loved. Franklin joined me for coffee, his friendship having deepened into a brotherhood during the recovery journey. "Do you ever regret pressing charges?" he asked, "given that he was your only child?" I considered the question seriously, as I had many times during sleepless nights. "No," I answered finally. "What Thomas and Sophia did wasn't just a crime against me. It was a crime against everything family should represent. Holding them accountable wasn't vengeance. It was justice. Not just for me, but for every vulnerable person they might have targeted next." Franklin nodded, understanding without requiring further explanation. We sat in comfortable silence until he spoke again. "Margaret would be proud of who you've become through all this. Not just a survivor, but a protector of others." The compliment warmed me deeply, because I believed it was true. In my darkest moments, I had found strength I didn't know I possessed. In my recovery, I had discovered purpose that gave meaning to the suffering. The foundation of my life had been shattered, but on that broken ground, I had built something new and surprisingly strong. As the sun set on another day of my reclaimed life, I thought about the wisdom earned through unwanted experience. True family, I had learned, isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's formed through shared pain and mutual support. Strength isn't avoiding betrayal, but surviving it with dignity. And rebuilding after devastation often creates stronger foundations than those that have never been tested. Have you ever faced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? How did you rebuild your life afterward? Share your story in the comments. And if this account helped you recognize warning signs or feel less alone in your experience, please like and subscribe. I share these difficult stories not for sympathy, but as beacons for others navigating similar dark waters. Together, we can transform personal tragedy into communal wisdom and protection for the most vulnerable among us.